Last week I started mounting these shocks in the truck, and then I realized I had to figure out the tie rod, the panhard bar, and the drag link first, and I barely got to the shocks. Today I'm going to build the brackets and the hoops to mount these in the truck. The off-road design axle bracket here is only set up for one shock, but I have this bypass shock and a coilover shock that both need to go in here, so I need to build a second bracket right in here to mount the coilover. I'm going to pull this shock out and do some measuring. The coilover shock needs to mount right down in here next to where the bypass shock goes. I know what you're thinking. If a guy had a long piece of all thread, he could make a really big bolt and get everything to line up right here. And I do. Okay, now I can just hang my other shock right in here, and I can build the bracket so that it'll hold right in here in place. I can weld it all together. This bracket's going to be holding the coilover shocks, and the whole weight of the front of the truck is sitting on those two shocks. So this bracket needs to be really, really strong, and last week I picked up some 1/4-inch plate steel for this very purpose. A 4x8 plate of steel is a pretty normal full-size plate of steel. And these 1/4-inch plates are really heavy. I always remember that a 1 square foot 1/4-inch thick plate of steel weighs 10 pounds. So a 4x8 would be 320 pounds. Last week Rowdy hooked me up and he got me these 1/4 size plates. It's just a 1/4 of a full plate. And that's nice because I can pack these around, and I end up chopping them into lots of little pieces anyway. So this right here is just an 80-pounder. Whew. This thing is cooking hot. It was out in the sun. I should have covered it with something. That's why it's not working so good. A lot of teeth missing. These come much better with the new blade. I'm gonna hang on to these because I'll bet we use them somewhere else. Time to go punch some holes in those, and with the K&Cut bits, drilling is always a pleasure. I'm going to weld this bracket into place, but it's attached to the bracket that holds the control arms in, and I don't want to burn the polyurethane out of those, so I'm just going to weld enough that it'll hold together right now, and then sometime when I have this thing apart, I can burn it in all the way. That's all I'm going to do on this side. There's a lot of steel in there. It'll suck out the heat, and I think those rods will be just fine. I'm going to go tack in the one on the other side. Looks like I got a little weld booger on one of the threads, so I can't get the nut to go past it. I'm going to use this little triangular thread file to clean it up so I can get it moving again. Now I've got a bracket down on the axle side. I'll need to build another one, like an inner piece, so it's in double shear. But I'm not going to do that right now, and that one's going to be kind of funky shaped, so I might draw it up and then have SendCutSend make it for me. I've got my shock back in here so I can move on to the top side and figure out what the hoop's gonna look like. There it is. It's gonna sit somewhere in here. Last week I started using the mock-up tools from 911 Motorsports. I'm gonna grab those to help me figure out what this hoop is gonna look like. All right, this is the piece right here that I need. All right, I'm using my mock-up tool in here, and I think I've got it about figured out. There's a lot of things that I'm trying to work around, so there's gonna be a bend on the front, and then I'm gonna have to have a second piece coming up in the back. So it'll be a two-piece design, but something like this. I'm gonna pull out the mock-up tool, do a few measurements, design it up, and then I can make my bends. This will tell me how many degrees I need to make my bend. So that's 95. So my bend is gonna be the supplement of that. 180 minus 95 is 85. So I'm gonna measure right here to get my length, right here to get my other length. This is gonna be a separate piece that's gonna have to weld in right here. All right, I dug out a piece of steel here and I made a printout that shows the bend angle that I need, the cut length that I need to make this piece to, and it shows the spring back angle, so I know exactly how far to bend it. You have to bend it a little extra because when you let go, it springs back. So I'm gonna chop this up, then we'll bend it and give it a test fit. This hammer here has been drying. The head kept coming off of it, so I hammered an extra wedge in it, and then I filled the top with Watco Danish oil, and I think it should be good and solid now. It's a good dead blow hammer. I got it from Angela's grandpa. It's an old one, but I can't read the make on it anymore. But it should be good for another 10 years. I need to clean this tube up because I like the tubes to be really clean when I put them through the bender. That way they slide through the die nice and they don't like grab and scratch up the material. So I'm gonna clean this up. All right, it says I start my bend at 15 and 13/16. My bend angle is 88.1 degrees. The last piece of tube I bent was 1.5 inches in diameter, so I need to switch the die back out to 1 3/4. This is the tube I cut. Came out pretty close to the angle we wanted. I need to cope this end, so I marked where I need to cut it. All right, this is how it's fitting up. This is gonna go right about there. Shock's gonna come right in here. The shock needs to come up about 1 inch. I wanna have 1 inch of extra travel at full bump, so when it articulates, it'll come up and eat up that 1 inch. Right about there. On this side, I'm gonna need a bar that goes down and then curves over into the frame. I'm using the pulley on the front of the engine to line up where this edge goes. That way I can keep it the same when I'm on the other side of the frame. I can't go any further back because if I do, that'll trap my brake booster in here. I want to be able to remove that and change that someday. So that's about as far back as I can go. I'm going to clean up the area on the frame that this hoop is going to weld to so I get a good strong weld. It's time to tack this hoop into place. I know it's gonna come back out again, but I need it to stay put while I build the other piece that's gonna connect to it. So I'm gonna lock it down. I took a couple tries to get this to stay right where I want it, but it's looking good and I can start making that other piece now. I've been using the 911 Motorsports mock-up tools figure out what this other brace is going to look like on the hoop. And it's actually kind of complicated because there's a whole bunch of clearance issues, but I tried a bunch of variations and this here is the winner. I'll show you how it fits really quick in the truck. There we go, right like that. All right, that's what it's gonna look like. It should have just enough room to clear the coil over right in here. So now I'm gonna take that piece, measure it up, and then turn it into steel. I sketched this one up the exact same way. Now I've got my cut length and my bend angle. All right, let's check this out. I was trying to bend to 34 degrees and my spring back thing told me to bend to 36.2. I went to 36.1. Let's see what I got. From there to there. All right, that's pretty good. I'm within 1 or 2 tenths. I'm happy with that. I'm setting up the notcher to shape this end of the tube so it'll fit against the frame really nice. And it's not a tube that I'm notching it into, it's the corner of the frame. So this is just gonna get me close, and then I'll use an angle grinder to fine tune it. Okay, here's the final notch. Let's go see how it fits. It's a pretty good fit, but the piece is a little bit long, so I might have to notch it again just to shorten it up. I can go ahead and put the notch in the other end though. I went and test fit this piece, and it does need to get a little bit shorter, so I'm just gonna notch it again and knock off about 3/8 of an inch. All right, I've got it in the truck now, and it's getting close. It's almost slipping into position. Time to start grinding it by hand. I really like how this is fitting, so I'm gonna mark it up so I can clean off the paint. This is looking perfect now. I've got everything right where I want it, so I'm gonna tack the 2 pieces of the hoop together so I can pull them out together and weld them up, and then I'll put it all back in. I've decided I'm gonna stop right here because this side is looking awesome. I love the way this looks, and I wanna copy it over on the other side before I take everything apart. First of all, let me show you this really quick. Angela helped me over the weekend pull all this junk out of here and build some new shelves and put those in and get this whole side organized. She does a ton of stuff that you don't get to see on the channel, but thanks, Angela. So on this side, you can see there's some stuff in the way. The big thing being this giant AC box that sticks out here into the engine bay. And there's no way that's gonna work with those shocks needing that exact same space. I was really sad to have to pull out the AC system, but I got something that's gonna be 11% better. This right here is an entirely new AC system from Vintage Air, made for a square body Chevy pickup truck. The old system is really bulky, like I was showing you. It sticks way into the engine bay, and then there's this huge thing inside the cab. I'm gonna get both of those out in a few minutes. This whole thing goes in the cab, and I can put a block off plate on the firewall, and all that stuff that's in the engine bay, I can just get rid of it. This plate here is the only thing that's gonna be in the engine bay. So that'll give me a ton of space. That'll open up room that I can stick these shocks in. I'm not gonna show you all the details on this right now. Just know that this is coming, and this is why I feel good about ripping out the system that's in my truck right now. Chopping out the wiring opened up a lot of space down here. Now I gotta figure out how to connect these heater hoses to each other so I can disconnect them from the heater core without them dripping all over the place. I went through a box of old fittings that I have, and I think I got a combination here that'll work for me. Don't let anyone talk you into throwing that junk away. That just saved me a trip to the parts store. Oh yeah, that opened up a huge amount of space. I've got that area all prepped now. I got the holes drilled out and everything scrubbed down. So I'm ready to put in this panel, and I'm gonna screw it down and glue it in, so it should be nice and solid when it's done. We got a lot of stuff taken out of the engine bay and opened up a lot of room in there. That panel is attached really good now. I don't think it'll ever come out again. Because I'm trying to match what I did on the other side, I've got a pretty good feel for where the parts are gonna land on the frame. So I can start cleaning that up right now. The passenger side hoop should look just like the driver's side, so I'm gonna bend up another set of tubes using the exact same recipe. Okay, the bends turned out really good, which is no surprise. The machine is really consistent. If you do the same thing every time, you get the same result. So these are looking great. I'm gonna notch and cope the ends of the tube now and go start fitting them in the truck. Pretty close. All right, this piece is ready to tack in, and it's a little tricky. It might take a couple of tries because I'm trying to match the other side, and it was sort of just an arbitrary angle. Like I just made that one look right. Now I have to make this one look the same. All right, I'm gonna do some measurements here. Well, that's pretty close. All right, if I can bend it a little bit. Oh, not bad. That went better than I thought. These are looking pretty similar. I actually cut this one an inch longer. The other side I had the brake booster in the way and I had to cut it kind of short, and there's gonna be some really tight tolerances. This side I tried to give myself a little bit more room. I don't think people will ever notice. I'll notice, it'll bug me. This side seems like it's sticking up a little higher. I might cut it like another 1/2 inch and get it down a little bit lower. Okay, I'm gonna try to put this back again and see if it looks better this time. I like where this piece is at. It's pretty close to the other side. I'm gonna start working on this one now. This piece is starting to go, but I think we can do a little bit better with some trimming right down in here. All right, this shock hoop is fitting now and it's looking good. I think my next thing to figure out is the tabs that the shocks are gonna attach to, and I think they just arrived. Let's go check them out. Last week when I started to build these shock towers, I knew I was gonna need these precise little tabs to hold the shock to the tower, so I designed them up on my computer. I placed an order with SendCutSend, and this package just arrived, which I think is perfect timing. Let's open it up and check out what we've got. Oh, there we go. Exactly what we needed. Okay, I'm gonna cut these open. We'll go test fit them, but they look perfect. And I love the way they package these things. All right, I grabbed a bolt to test fit in here. Look at that. That is what I wanted. A super tight fit with no wobblage. That's why I went with SendCutSend on this. The precision. This one came with a sour punch. I don't normally like sour candies, but we're gonna give it a try. Ah, it's potent. That's like 10 pickles. Whew. I don't know if I can swallow this. You can use this link here for 15% off your order at SendCutSend, and I'm gonna paste that in my description so you can find it later. Okay, here's my tab, and they're gonna mount in here on the inside of my hoop like this. So there'll be like one here, and then there'll be two more down here. So the next thing I gotta do is figure out exactly where these things need to go on here, and then I'll tack them in place. I'm trying to mark where the shock tabs are gonna go, like how far back they need to be on the hoop. My idea is to tack this thing together, then pull it out of here, weld everything together on the bench, and then come back and install it on the frame. That's my idea. Okay, I can go do the other side. A couple of last tacks on this hoop, and then I can start breaking these loose. All right, here's both my hoops. Right now they're still pretty fragile. So the first thing I'm gonna do is weld these welds all the way. I save the drops from when I cut plates with hole saws so that I can use them to plug the ends of tubes just like this. So I got a couple of these here. I'll clean these up and we'll get those tubes capped. These are welded up, but there's something else that I want to do before I start putting these tabs directly on the tubing. I've seen other vehicles that have had the tabs totally ripped off of this tubing because there's so much force on these when you're off-roading. I want to reinforce the upper section of this tubing where the tabs are going to attach. To do that, I'm going to take a piece of bigger tubing and split it in half and kind of clamshell layer it onto these hoops. Okay, this is one of the hoops, and this is the reinforcement piece I made. It fits on there really nice, but it's a little long, so I'm gonna have to chop it down and maybe even curve the inside edge a little bit so it'll fit down in here. These marks right here show about where the tabs are gonna go. Something like that. This reinforcement piece that I made, it's ready to go on. I've got these holes drilled in it. Those are for plug welds or rosettes. And I'm gonna fit it in here kind of like this. And then my tabs will weld to this. So I'm gonna tack it in place, get the tabs lined up, and then I'll just bomb it all together. All right, now we got a good tight fit on there. Now it's ready to weld. All right, it's time to put these tabs on. And little tabs like this are actually a really important part of your vehicle. Some pieces of the vehicle, like the roll cage, they never really see a load unless you're in some kind of an accident. These get to work out every time you go on a ride. So tabs are what hold the whole weight of the vehicle up. They will hold the links to the frame. They will hold the engine to the frame. They mount the transmission. Little tabs like this have a huge job, and it's really important that I get them on here right. These tabs need to be spaced 1.5 inches apart, so I cut a spacer and I made it just slightly longer than 1.5 inches. This spacer right here, 20 thousandths bigger than 1.5 inches. That gives me a little bit of clearance so that I can fit the shock down in there, and then when I tighten up the bolt, it'll pull everything together. So I want these tabs welded in here at a 45-degree angle, so I'm gonna clamp them together with the bolt, get them just where I want them, and I'll tack everything in place. All right, this one's gonna go right in here. And you can see that I've got the spacing marked out over here and over here. The spacing between where I mount these two shocks is really important. I needed it to be as close together as possible so it would clear other stuff in the engine bay, but I don't want them to hit each other. And when the shocks travel, when the suspension droops, they're gonna pivot closer to each other. I did a little math to calculate how much, and I'll show you really quick. I figured out the angle of the control arms at full droop, and then I calculated that 5 inches of separation will get reduced to 4.56 at that angle. I think that's gonna be enough. Time to weld these in. All right, I've got this piece all cleaned up and I think it's looking pretty good. And it's ready to go into the truck. So I'm gonna go clean up a couple spots on the frame so I can weld this in. I think that's enough prep work on the frame. Time to put this in. I did a couple quick checks with this. Everything looks good. I'm gonna weld this in all the way. Now I need to do all those same things to this hoop. This hoop is all welded up. I'm ready to test fit it in the truck now. These shock hoops are installed and they're looking good. I'm happy with them. I can't put the shocks in yet because I have to make that bottom bracket. I gotta design it and have that built. So that'll happen soon, but I've got one more thing to show you really quick. I've had a lot of people asking about the angle grinder stand that I use all the time in my videos, and I am working on getting a kit for these available on my website. So I'll keep designing that. I'm working on making it easier to build and less expensive for you guys. So I'll let you know as soon as those are available. Thanks for watching.